Hello and welcome to the BAP. We are broadcasting from the Progressive Bubble on the 14th of August 2016. My name is Franco and joining me is Dean. Not joining me is that cuck, Jason.
He's very unreliable.
Very unreliable. I'm looking at Greg thinking, you might have to step up one day, buddy.
We may need to have Jason, Dean and Greg one day. He doesn't have a voice for radio or a face for radio, Greg.
No, but I mean, for the first time, he's actually wanted to make a comment on today's show, and that comment was, sorry, what was that, Greg? Jason is a cuck?
Seems to be a running gag.
I've been quite harsh on Jason, considering without Jason's help from his bed where he's suffering...
From his sick bed.
His sick bed, where he's suffering from grave illness, the show would not have been possible, quite literally.
Look,
His absence made this show possible.
We're not masters of our technology, are we? We sort of struggle along. Jason works the board and the computer, and without him, we have realised we have certain limitations. We have all the talent, obviously, in the room right now.
In IT.
And yet none of the ability.
Anyway, let's go straight into douchebag filter. I completed my binge watching with my partner Helen of Stranger Things.
Really good, hey?
Fantastic, loved it. Especially some of the little bits where like the silent nods to 1980s films, like a screenshot of fists bumping and holding for a second like that.
Yeah, it's probably I was reading some stats. Apparently, it's more popular on Netflix than Daredevil is, and more popular than Making of a Murderer.
I wouldn't be surprised. It seems to...
It's their biggest release yet.
Everyone loves the 80s. Well, I mean,
everyone was alive in the 80s, loves the 80s.
Mm-hmm. And there's something for everyone in that show.
Yeah, sure.
I have some questions, though. Perhaps you might be able to help me in the...
I can try.
More or less, the show finished... Oh, spoiler alert. I'm probably going to give away certain bits, which may or may... I don't know. Even if you know what happens in the show, I don't think it spoils it. I think the show gives enough out there along the way.
I think the journey is more important in that show than the destination.
Yes, exactly. So you don't... Even saying if anything specific happens, it hasn't really given anything away. A lot of it is sort of... You can see it coming.
Like when Ned Stark dies in Game of Thrones.
Not so much that style, but I mean, that show was based...
I'm just throwing around spoilers, because we're throwing around spoilers. So
Anyway, in the storyline, when they're explaining of how they came to the Upside Down world, it seems like they were chasing some Russian guy in the netherworld, but they never quite... For me, I didn't understand where they were going with that.
No, I think that they're leaving that open so far. The suggestion that maybe there's other portals somewhere else.
And that a Russian's gone there.
Yeah, I don't know. Everyone that went there seemed to die.
Yes.
Either the world was draining their life essence or they got murdered by the things that live there. So even if he is there, I don't think he's alive there unless he has something else sort of protecting him from the environment. Okay,
so you're just as in the wondering as I am on that issue.
I had a few big questions from that show at the end.
For example,
when the police chief got in the car, the black car, and then it was like 1 month later, he got in a government vehicle, They drove off somewhere, and you're like, what's that about? And then they didn't show you anything, and then a month later he's back in town, and the little girl's missing.
Yes, they never really... It was never quite explained. Did she die? Did she go to the netherworld? But they did give that little snippet of the police chief leaving her favourite food in that sort of drop box out in the bush.
Yeah.
In terms of him being taken away by the black car, I took it as they had to square off the deal of, you're not going to tell anyone what happened. You're going to make sure no one talks about this in the town. I thought, for me, that was the neat time for that.
Maybe. I mean, he was working with them as well. He gave up the kids' locations and stuff a few times.
I was quite surprised he gave up the specific location. I thought he would have given, an alternate place for them to go.
I think it was... I mean, obviously, when you're dealing with an existential threat from an alternate universe, maybe having the resources of the government behind you is a good thing.
Perhaps.
Maybe he decided, hey, me, Winona Ryder, and a bunch of kids, probably not enough to deal with this situation. Maybe. I don't know. I think that would be enough for me. Winona and some kids, I could do with that, and then take on anything.
He made his whole thing up. He was sort of plying this line that it's all about the kids, and then it wasn't about one kid. So it seemed a bit off.
He's interesting.
Why was one child more important than the other child?
Well, he's an interesting fellow, isn't he?
He was.
So I'm looking forward to season 2 to see what that all means.
I also was confused about Nancy Wheeler's final heartthrob choice. She seemed to be going down one path, but ended up with the sort of douchey bag guy at the end anyway.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's they're saving that sort of will they, won't they romantic comedy angst for future seasons.
I found the teenage romance angst a bit tiresome at times. I know it was
I don't think you were the target audience for that.
definitely not.
Yeah.
I've made my positions felt quite clearly on this show. I have no room for romance on non-romantic shows.
Yeah, I think they definitely... I found the show interesting because they had different layers to appeal to different audience ages and to... Well, not that kids could watch the show because it was full-on freaky at times. But there was definitely stuff there for young adults, for teenagers, for adults, for people who were from the 80s, people who were fans of 80s music, people who were fans of 80s culture. There was a lot of levels there that show worked on.
And there was the silent nods to the directors he was directly ripping off along the way. Like, I think there was a poster of The Thing.
Yeah.
Or they were actually watching The Thing on one of the shows.
Yeah. No, it was good. I liked all of that. I thought it was really, really well done, really well polished, and even well thought out with the little nods.
And it looks like they are going to get a second season.
They have got a second season, yeah.
It's been confirmed?
Yeah, apparently.
Oh, okay.
Well, I mean, it's the biggest show on Netflix, so...
Exactly. I'd heard, from numerous sources that, they'd be foolish not to do it.
Look, fingers crossed. Like I said, I've read, and I'm pretty sure on the internet I've read that it's been renewed.
You think it would be?
But I might be wrong on that. Sometimes the internet lies.
Really?
Yeah, I know. You would have thought everything you read on the internet is true.
Some people say the internet lies. Wow.
Yeah, it's almost as reliable as Donald Trump for his truthiness.
Do you have any other douchebag news?
Not especially. I haven't been watching much television. I've watched a couple of films.
Oh?
I went and watched CIA, Central Intelligence, I should say, with Davo. Little Hart and a Big Johnson, as it was announced. It was actually quite good. Okay. I don't normally like Kevin Hart. I find him a bit annoying. But The Rock is amazing in this and everything he does. He plays his character so very well, which is a victim of high school bullying. He was a large... fat child in high school, and some people stole his clothes and threw him out. It was just very well done. This high school coming of age / spy thriller thing. It really worked. And The Rock, obviously, even though he's getting on, he's still massive.
I have a soft spot for Dwayne Johnson.
I have a soft spot for Dwayne as well. He did really well, and I keep going to see his things.
I'm not necessarily looking for Academy Award winning performances from The Rock, but he's had a mixed bag of performances. I think sometimes when he goes down the serious film route, it doesn't quite work. But when he plays his cliche characters, it always works fantastically. He did that Rumble in the Jungle, I think it was called, and I love that. I mean, it's quite a...
With Stifler, whose name I can't remember.
Exactly. Sean something or other.
Yeah.
Can't remember off the top of my head, but fantastic. I would like them to do more movies if they could.
My favourite joke in this movie was when he described Kevin Hart as being like a black Will Smith, which I really quite enjoyed. And the response was, "I'm not even sure, but I think that's racist."
All right, so you watched The Rock?
The Rock, yeah. And the other thing we watched was... it was like a Seth Rogen film called The Night Before, which is about these three friends on the night before Christmas. They always celebrate, have these parties. Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Seth Rogen, and another actor whose name I can't remember. And look, it's just this really beautiful little tale. Again, it's one of the things that works on multiple levels. So there's sort of three stories going on. There's like an action story. There's a Seth Rogen on drugs story. And there's Joseph Gordon-Levitt's romantic comedy. And it was really good. It was really good. I watched that while hungover. And it worked on many levels.
Even the hungover level.
Well, on the hungover level, yeah, I could really just zone out and laugh at Seth Rogen. So there's this bit where he gets his phone confused with someone else's, and obviously he's on drugs, and he starts receiving dick pics on what's it called, Snapchat.
Yeah.
With the guy going, do you like this? It's a picture of a cock. The guy's name is James, and he's like, well, of course I like it. It's a beautiful dick. And they have this back and forth conversation where Seth Rogen's trying to work out the names in the phone, so he thinks it must know this person he knows. And then he is like, I think I'm about to have gay sex. I don't understand where this is coming from. And it turns out to be James Franco, and they have this really, they're very good friends, and they have this beautiful moment at a Miley Cyrus concert in the end. I strongly recommend that movie. It was really, really good.
Fair enough. Does that round up your...
That is the limit of my douchebaggery.
Yeah, okay.
Well, of the news type, I can tell on radio.
Well, all right. Well, let's move into the...
Crack on into the news.
And as far as I'm concerned, I've totally disbanded with short, fast news and long, serious news myself.
Yeah, I think we're going to adopt a more conversational style, or I think we already have.
It's, well, yeah. I personally like to be factually accurate, but the amount of work you have to put into being factually accurate and...
Wait, Donald Trump doesn't do it.
It takes hours. Like
just make claims.
And the other thing was I didn't spend...
Barack Obama started ISIS.
Most of my time...
Hillary's second in command.
Reading from a sheet. Like, well, that's what reporters do. That's not really...
You don't want to be a reporter?
Well,
You don't want to be protected by the rights of a
if I
reporter?
wanted to be a reporter, I want to be paid. Show me the money.
Right. Well, maybe we can monetize on YouTube somehow. We get some fans, we get some watchers, we get some listeners. YouTube starts paying us, and then boom, you can have a set, and we'll be on video.
I'd just be happy with the crazy parties.
Right. I don't think journalists get too many crazy parties.
No.
They get locked up in jail for protecting their sources.
No, I don't want any of that.
No one wants that.
Don't want any of that. First thing that I found of note this week was
Census fail?
no. I'm going to cast my way over to the States because
Wow.
obviously a lot's happening with the campaigning for the presidency, and Hillary in an economic speech. How hypocritical is this? I just whinged about reading from a sheet, and I'm doing exactly that now. But
No one can see that. We're on radio.
I'm a
There's no
nice guy.
visuals to accompany it other than the three of us sitting on a couch, even though Jason's not here.
I want to get the comments right. So
Right. Well,
reading from
good.
the sheet, not what I want to do.
Sheet says,
But I just have a terrible memory. In an economic speech delivered in Michigan, Hillary said,
wonderful radio.
I can't read my message.
Right. Hillary said, I can't read my handwriting.
She said,
Oh, what a bitch. How dare she say that?
her message to every worker in Michigan and across America is that I will stop any trade deal that kills jobs or holds wages down, including the Trans-Pacific Partnership. I oppose it now, I'll oppose it after the election, and I'll oppose it as the president.
She hasn't opposed it before the election.
No, well, she was previously in favour of the
Very
TPP,
much in favour.
and obviously,
I mean, Hillary will say anything to get votes.
definitely, and she's a
Not
very,
that Trump wouldn't either, but
she's a
they're
smart
both.
politician. She's reading the winds that have come with the what do you call it? The candidacy nomination process, where Bernie and his support group moved her to the left, and she heard the calls from the base that the TPP. Well, I don't know about the base. The TPP was on the nose. But what I'm finding interesting is you have a sitting Democratic president who's pushing the TPP. So Obama is endorsed Hillary.
Yep.
However, Hillary's not backing the TPP. Obama's still pushing the TPP. They've actually given the 30-day notice for the next phase of the fast track. So
I think, though, I mean, if you were Barack Obama and you're in a position of having to, endorse Hillary or Trump, you're not going to endorse Trump.
no, of course not. But
And-
he had the choice at the time to endorse Bernie. His endorsement became
I don't think he would ever do that.
no, but
He's an establishment man.
true. But I just find it interesting that you've got, on the one hand, the presidential campaigning going, we're not for TPP, and I don't know, in Australian politics it's a bit different. The leader of the party is towing the party line, whereas you have this situation where the Democratic candidate doesn't necessarily have to toe the party line of the current sitting president.
True. I'm wondering if this isn't in response to some of the stuff we talked about last week with Michael Moore, where he was identifying the sort of the Rust Belt, the places in America where, jobs are gone, factories are closed, there aren't positions for these people to work in, these blue-collar workers, and they're worried that they will flip and become Republican states. Now, that's the kind of place which wants to hear that we're against the TPP. We're against globalization, we're against lowering tariffs and pushing jobs offshore.
But how can you deliver a message where one Democratic president is pushing the TPP and the Democratic candidate for the next election is saying, I don't support it?
Yeah, I mean, we've had sort of 30 years of economic liberalism with people trying to reduce trade walls and saying and promising it'll create jobs, it'll lower taxes, everyone will be better off. And the truth of the matter seems to be that it's not that
But
that's
they're
not
on
the
the
case.
same party. How can you have this forked tongue approach to politics?
Well, I mean, yeah, but you got to remember that, say, Sarah Palin is in the same party as Donald Trump, and they're pretty different. The same party as Mitt Romney, the same party. There's room. It's a what do they call it? A wide church.
There's many pews in the church.
There is, and different people who have sort of similar positions about the way they want the country to unfold can still have differing opinions about other things. And I imagine international trade is one of those things.
It's very interesting, though, because the TPP's at a crisis point. Obviously, Barrack wants to push it as far as he can while he's still president, even though he's basically a lame duck president. And yet you've got your main candidate for the presidency saying, I don't support it.
Yeah.
I mean, she's left herself enough wiggle room.
She'll probably change her mind. I mean, there's enough big companies who are sort of in favour of this that it would be unpopular for her not to do it with her financial supporters, maybe not with the voters. And all of this is generally aimed at a sort of weaponised trade against China anyway.
Well, and what will probably happen, I'm just spitballing here, is that if she becomes president, they make a few changes to TPP. Now it's a fantastic deal for workers.
It's a shit deal for everyone.
Yeah.
Look, I thought the interesting thing this week I noticed coming out of the Hillary camp. Did you see the campaign video she put out, basically linking Donald Trump to Vladimir Putin and suggesting he was a pawn working for the Russians?
No, I didn't.
Well, it seems to be. It was definitely produced and authorized by Hillary. It's an astounding piece of hyperbole, really, and it's sort of terrifying to see this kind of publication coming out of the Hillary campaign because I felt it made her look quite scared of Trump. So she's trying to mudsling. It was like the kind of thing you'd expect to see in the 80s during the Cold War.
Yeah. Okay.
I think that Trump is an idiot. I don't think he's a pawn of Putin. I also think it is less than helpful to paint anyone as a villain. You know, like you're eventually going to have dealings with these people internationally.
Yeah, but I think she's playing off the old Cold War era.
She is definitely.
You know,
even
there's a lot
even
of
at
people
the
who still don't trust Russia.
even at
America.
the DNC conference, she was talking about Russia being their adversary, and I don't understand where that's coming from. I mean, I understand from a NATO funding perspective that they like to paint that up so they can build missile systems and put them ever closer to Russian borders. But I still find Hillary to be. I don't think she's going to be good for the world. I think she's a bit too hawkish for me.
No, definitely.
I think Trump is worse. So it's a tough position to be put in as an American voter or even as an external observer of American politics. But these kind of things she's putting out worry me.
True, but
it may just be targeted, like as you said before, at specific voters. Maybe she's aiming to get the scared redneck vote.
Yeah, well, the older redneck vote who are still fearful of Russia. You're definitely right on when you're talking about the hawkishness of Hillary, but she's not going to have any honeymoon period if she gets in because the left of the Democratic Party have a lot of leverage over her. There's no goodwill with Hillary, so basically she's going to be hammered from the left of her party from day one. There's going to be no grace period to get away with dodgy shit.
It'll be interesting to see. I'm still not convinced that Trump won't end up taking it out because he's just got people who actually want to support him that will go out on election day and vote for him.
Well, there's definitely that case, but what I'm hearing a lot of is he doesn't have the fundamentals on the ground for campaigning.
No.
And that's going to be problematic for him. You know, you're going to have a situation where if you don't have a mobilisation of people who are pushing the punters out to go in to vote, because remember, this is voluntary.
Yep.
But if people are saying, no, I'm not voting, you know, you're going to be losing a lot of supporters.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see. I mean, Trump's strategy all along seems to be keep saying crazy shit until something actually sticks and resonates with the population, and then repeat that crazy thing over and over until people believe it's the truth.
Well, and seemingly using free media in lieu of proper on the ground grassroots campaign.
Well, that's it. You say crazy things, the media publish them for you, and your message gets out, and you don't have to pay for anything.
But I think what people are forgetting is his success when he was campaigning for the nomination. He was only campaigning to the base of the Republican Party. Now he's campaigning to normal people, and normal people don't fall for that shit necessarily.
True.
That's what I'm hearing.
Look, it'll be interesting to see. He also this week came out and suggested that maybe the NRA could stop Hillary.
Yes.
Well,
no, not the NRA. He said the Second Amendment folk.
Yeah. Well, same thing, really.
Where he when he was talking about Hillary, I think Hillary trying to take away guns?
Yeah.
He was saying, well, there's nothing you can do. If she gets in, there's nothing you can do about it. And then he quipped, well, perhaps the Second Amendment folk might be able to do something. And, you know, I understand the criticism he got for that. It was a joke. Most people could take it as a joke. But what a lot of pundits were saying is, you can't make those sort of jokes to 330 million people because there's a small percentage who take those comments as literal.
Yeah. And there have been presidents assassinated in the past.
It was interesting when he was first questioned about those comments. He doubled down on them, and then once the campaign team say, no, you've pretty much that's treasonous behaviour.
Well, it's potentially treasonous if Hillary becomes president. It's certainly treasonous. While she's just a nominee, less treasonous. I mean, if those Second Amendment folks out there want to take care of that problem for Donald Trump, so that he can't be charged with treason. And I'm sure he'd be willing to accept that. The other one, I alluded to it earlier, where he suggested that Barack Obama was in many ways the founder of ISIS.
Yes, which he doubled down on when further questioned upon that.
Yeah, and Hillary is, if anyone would be the second most person to blame, it'd be Hillary.
Yeah, he was the MVP for ISIS.
Yeah. I would have thought George W. Bush probably bears a lot of responsibility there as well. Not to mention the people who are actually in ISIS, but for setting up the situation in Iraq where these people were in prisons and they were being abused. And
the power vacuum as well.
Yeah.
I heard him on an interview where the interviewee was trying to give him a get-out-of-jail card by suggesting, in all seriousness, don't you think it was the power vacuum that was created by the by the Obama administration's withdrawal of troops at Kosovo. He went, nope.
Yeah.
Pretty much answered, nope, doubling down. He was the founder of ISIS.
Yeah, which I thought was interesting, and I think that'll resonate with people as well. I think that there is an argument with a lot of things Trump says. It's more the way he says them than the point he's trying to make a lot of the time. Like sometimes I feel like he is trying to make the point that it was the power vacuum, but then he just acts like no, I'm not trying to make that point. The same thing happened with the NATO stuff, where he's talking about maybe we should make people pay for our American troops and support and bases and guns in their countries. Like it's not a bad point. I'm not saying people should pay for it, but maybe you shouldn't spend so much money on military spending when you can't afford to look after the middle class.
Well, hold on. No, he wants to make America's military the greatest and best in the world. He wants to rebuild it. He wants to make it great again.
Man, it's already up there.
It is the most powerful army in the world. Well, military power in the world.
Yeah. Well, we'll see.
Although, according to Trump, it's not. It has to be rebuilt.
Yeah, look, certain people out there are doing a pretty good job of rebuilding their armies. Look at Turkey. Bit of a purge. Get rid of the people who are treasonous. Mm-hmm. Rebuild. Maybe that's what Trump's going to be after. Mm-hmm. Get rid of those generals who voted Democrat.
Okay. So what else has been cooking, Dean?
Look, my interesting thing for me this week, I alluded to it then with Turkey. So the Turkey's president, Recep Erdogan, met with his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin, or should I say his friend, Vladimir Putin. He put out a press release saying he was meeting with his friend, Vladimir, this week in St. Petersburg. To try and repair relations between the two countries. I'm sure you'll remember last November, I think it was, when the Turks shot down a Russian jet over Syria.
And the relationship between Russia and Turkey froze substantially.
Yeah. Russia basically banned all of their products being exported there. They banned all the tourism. I think Turkey got something like 40% of its tourism revenue from Russia. And a bunch of other things. So the Turkish economy has done a bit of a crash. Not to mention they've had, a coup attempt and some other things going on. But Erdogan was in St. Petersburg talking to Vladimir Putin. He was very positive about it on social media. Comrade Putin was a bit more pragmatic about it when he described it, He wasn't talking it up, anything. But the prospect has come up because obviously Turkey's looking more and more like they're never going to become a member of the European Union. So the prospect is coming up of perhaps Turkey joining the Eastern Eurasian Union, which is Russia's proposal / equivalent of the EU, although it's basically Russia and 4 other little countries at the moment. But having a power like Turkey in there who already have such strong economic ties to Russia, it might be beneficial to have cut rates, reduction in tariffs and so forth. So that's interesting. I thought also interesting this week was, and it was during this time where Erdogan was in Russia, they revealed information suggesting that the pilot responsible for shooting down that Russian jet back in November had been arrested. He was a member of the coup. So he was flying one of the F-16s over Ankara. Which is interesting. I mean, they probably just arrested him anyway because Erdogan's just getting rid of political enemies. It's really hard to tell.
Payback favour for the Russians as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously the military potentially weren't necessarily following Erdogan's orders when they decided to shoot down that plane either. They might have been acting alone. The Turkish military doesn't necessarily, historically did not report to Erdogan. Now they probably do. They're more his stooges. The other thing that's also going to come out this, the Turkish government has been claiming, and I should stress that Erdogan himself has not said in his, but the Turkish government has been blaming the US for the failed coup and for the continued, asylum that they're providing to Gulen. And the hardline conservative papers in Turkey, Yeni Şafak, which is, I would imagine, Turkey's equivalent of Fox News, if you would.
Okay.
So they kind of back the Conservative Party, but they also say crazy shit.
Much like Fox News.
Yeah, much like Fox News. So Yeni Şafak have been running articles suggesting that US General John F. Campbell was behind the coup and helping to oversee it, and that money was provided for that coup by the CIA and funneled through Nigeria. $2 billion apparently funneled through Nigeria to try and get that coup to be successful. All of this, I think, is to be taken with a pinch of salt. But it is interesting that Erdogan, pretty much the week after, met with Putin.
Yeah, well, I mean, is it fair to say America knew of the coup attempt? Probably. Is it fair to say that America gave the green light and the nod of go for it?
Go for it, we don't care?
Probably.
Yeah.
Perhaps they offered some casual assistance? Possibly.
There were a couple of spooks on American TV. I'm sorry, a couple of ex-CIA agents. I just like the word spooks for describing them. So there are a couple of ex-CIA agents on American TV during the time. on CNN, basically suggesting that they've worked with coups in the past and been involved in them, which I don't think they've ever admitted publicly. But they talked about that, and they said, look, this was a very poorly organised coup. It's not the kind of thing that you'd see done by the CIA, because we'd be a bit more professional than that, and this would have changed hands. But at the same time, it's not like the CIA don't have a habit of bankrolling pretty much any coup in a democratic nation where people are getting a little bit outside of American control.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think they spread cash around all over the place in these sorts of matters, and it wouldn't surprise me if some money changed hands to grease the wheels of coup.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm going to continue to follow these. This I think is one of the more interesting stories at the moment.
Yeah,
and a proper alliance with Turkey's still a member of NATO, but there are talks about if Erdogan continues to behave with his dictatorial ways that maybe they won't. But I mean, Turkey's also the second largest military power in NATO and the most important one in the region. And it's in NATO's interest at the moment, at least, to have Turkey not be good friends with Russia and maybe not be supporting Bashar al-Assad in Syria. Turkey's been one of the biggest supporters of, shall we say, ISIS in their fight to try and overthrow Assad. Maybe not ISIS 100%, but
is willing to curtail the Kurdish activities in the north.
So they've definitely been funneling guns and money across the border. So that'll be interesting to see anyway. So this is a region where, the only semi-stable secular government is rapidly becoming not secular. I mean, Erdogan is quite the Islamist and potentially no longer going to be a democracy. They were a beacon of light.
Well, the prime example to show how you can have a secular government in a Muslim country.
Yep.
Ataturk must be rolling in his grave.
Yeah. So at the moment, it's looking very much like they're not going to be so democratic much longer, and not so secular either. So this is interesting to see and disappointing. Although Russia is a big sort of atheist. Well, then there's obviously the Russian church, but the Soviet Union was very atheist.
Back on domestic shores, we had the census blunder.
Yeah,
interesting
big
story
time
that's turned
blunder.
out to be.
Well, you got to watch out for those Chinese hackers. Remember?
So the big story in Australia was obviously the census website went down. So all Australians were encouraged on Tuesday to go to the census website and hand over their private information and tacitly agreed to having their identity stored with that information.
Yeah, about 2 million people were able to successfully submit their forms out of, I think it's 16 million households. So
a lot of people had a lot to say about what a clusterfuck that whole process was, the site going down and so forth. But what was interesting was to seeing the more detailed articles about what actually led up to this mess.
Yeah, they've been pretty interesting. Obviously, originally the ABS came out and blamed Chinese hackers, which everyone sort of laughed off and suggested was ludicrous. And more information has come out during the week to indicate,
Well, you had what's his name? Duncan Young, who's he was the head of Census 2000. He sent a memo in February to, who was it now? The executive of the census. I'm not sure if it was the census or the Australian Bureau of
it'd be ABS probably.
Was that we're at Code Red.
Yeah, right.
Code Red, as far as Census 2016 goes, the exact quote was, as most of you are aware, the census program has alerted its steering committee and board that is assessed its status as red.
That's pretty dire.
And that's in February.
I mean, 18 months ago, they were seeking approval from the, it would have been the Abbott government at the time, I imagine, or it might have been Turnbull. Either way, to not do the census this year and just go to a 10-yearly census rather than every 5.
Yeah.
They were advised at the time that is unlikely to get through the Senate, so that they're going to have to push ahead. But basically, they were saying we don't have the funding and the resources, we're not ready for this. And the government of the day said, yes, you are.
Yeah, well, do you know why that is? Apparently, I just learned this today from some of the news articles I was reading, but the did I write it down? Oh, yes. The primary purpose of the census is to count the number of people aged 18 and over to determine the shape of electorates. So this is why both Labor and the Coalition are so interested in the census. A lot of people, and this is what I saw in terms of commentary in the defence of the census, is that a lot of our nation's big decisions about infrastructure, medicine policy, and so forth, is derived from census data.
Yeah.
However, that's not what's in the interest of
Unemployment, education, like all these things come from census data.
But why it's so important to our politicians is it's for shaping of the electorates.
Yeah, they do like to reshape the electorates.
Which was the primary reason why they said, no, you're still going to have to do it every, 5 years?
Yeah, it's interesting. Obviously, I wasn't a fan of the provision of private data.
So previously,
basically
for people
didn't
who
do
are
it.
not familiar, especially with the paper bases, it was anonymous.
Yes.
You only gave enough information from them to...
your personal details were discarded when
Yeah.
they aggregated the data. It's not the case anymore.
No.
The ABS is basically looking to shore up their funding
Yes.
because they can't guarantee funding from the government. So they were trying to provide additional products that they could sell, which would allow private companies to get trend information based on the Australian population because they could guarantee the linkage from year to year from this data set of the census data into other data sets because they use the same unique identifiers for people, basically to give themselves additional revenue streams so they weren't reliant on government grants.
Yeah, well, you've had heads of the ABS in recent years saying they barely had enough funds to keep the lights on.
Yeah.
It's been crazy. So it's not surprising that this disaster did end up happening with the 2016 census.
It's pretty funny though. I don't know if you've got the. There was a journalist, tech journalist, who's a contributor for the ABC. I don't have the details here, but he basically said that his sources inside the government indicate that there was a DDoS attack, that they talked to their provider, and they activated the geo-blocking, so anything from external parties went nowhere. They then had a router crash. They were using load balancing, so they were sharing data between these two routers. But the second router, the one that crashed, had the information. It had not been mirrored to the secondary one. So when they took the first one offline, all hell broke loose. The second router did not know what to do. And then they started getting what they thought were intrusion alarms were firing. So these alarms were going off false, saying that they'd been breached, that the private data was at risk. So they shut everything down and called the Australian Signals Directorate in, which is essentially black hat hackers that work for the government, to investigate. Now, they've since come out and said, look, nothing bad happened. Everything's fine. There was no breach. It was a false alarm. People reacted. They panicked a bit, but it was probably the right thing to do. So it's pretty interesting to see there's no mention of Chinese hackers.
Well, I read that same article, and the other thing to mention was they were originally provided from the upstream providers called NextGen.
Yep.
They were asked, the ABS were asked,
Do you want DDoS protection?
did you want? Nah, it's all right.
Yeah, that was IBM. It was IBM that said that.
Was it?
Fallback strategy is geo-blocking.
Yeah.
We don't want that active to start with. We'll tell you when we are on. The census website is back up now, apparently, and the geo-blocking is enabled. And it's pretty broken as it is because it also blocks people who use DNS servers over in America. I don't know about you. My router at home is configured to use Google's DNS.
Okay, yeah.
8.8.8.8 for anyone out there, and secondary DNS at 8.8.4.4. Way quicker for your internet and way more reliable.
I'll have to ask you this off air.
Yeah. It's just worth. I just get better performance internet in general if I use Google's DNS entries.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, that completely prohibits me from seeing the census website because it's not visible to anyone outside of Australia, and my DNS servers are. Also, obviously, if you're using a VPN, which many Australians do, it doesn't work.
Well, I'm actually confused as to what the status of the the Census 2016. Have they decided to abandon it? Are they still pressing ahead with trying to get people to do it?
Uncertain. I think they're trying to press ahead with people trying to do it. They've come out and said there won't be any fines for people who didn't do it on the night because they couldn't do it. But it's been a bit vague around, if you don't do it at all now, is there a fine?
Well, that's what I'm confused about. And I thought, I'll wait till they start screaming. And
Yeah, there's been nothing really. I mean, Turnbull said that heads will roll. I'm not sure how obviously they're also talking about potentially suing IBM, which if anyone is familiar with past government's involvements with IBM, that's probably not going to work out so well for them. There was a deal with Queensland Health. IBM, I think, are banned from working with the Queensland government because I think it was a $9 million contract they had to build the health system that ran $1.2 billion.
Or the payroll system for the health.
$1 $1.2 billion over budget. When the government tried to recuperate some of their losses, they found out they were stuck in an ironclad contract with IBM, and they were on the line for the extra billion above the $9 million they'd originally budgeted for. So I would imagine this census thing is probably a similar state where you won't be able to sue IBM for anything.
And look, to be honest, IBM have copped quite harsh criticism in this, but if you actually read the backstories on both those situations,
Yeah, I remember
the
right.
Census 2016 and the Queensland health payroll fiasco, the organisation, not IBM, but the government department themselves contributed to a lot of the mess that they found themselves in.
Yeah, they didn't have a firm set of requirements, and they continued to dilly-dally and mess around, and IBM just let them do it. It seems to be, it's interesting though, it seems to be that IBM are perfectly happy to encourage bad project management. Like if you can't make your mind up and you want to keep getting their engineers in and talking to people and doing that, they'll let you do it.
Well, that's it. It's good for IBM's bottom line. The further a project extends out with change requests, the more money they make.
But it's not so good for their reputation. So Big Blue over in America might step in this instance because it's a massive, massive failure. And if IBM are made to look bad, then that would look bad for them bidding for other government contracts internationally. So I'll be interested to see how this goes. I imagine some statisticians will lose their jobs.
Which I think it's really...
It's not like you can fire the minister in charge. He's been in charge for 3 weeks.
Yeah, but I mean, why would you be firing statisticians? I mean, hold on. The government itself still has to take some of the blame. You know, this situation happened within a vacuum. You know, and it's not just the coalition. The Labor government before that had been cutting
funding.
Funds,
Yeah.
So it's like, well, there are reasons why you find yourself in this situation, and simply just coming out with the Prime Minister of the day saying, well, people are going to get fired now. Well, hold on.
Yeah, well, I think Malcolm's looking weak across the board.
He's been looking weak for a long time.
So when he says something like heads are going to have to roll, I don't think he can back down on that anymore. He's got very little political capital.
Well, it depends. Was it a statement or a thought bubble?
This is true. Look, he does a lot of thought bubbles. I've got another thought bubble to talk about later on with Malk. But I think it's quite embarrassing for him personally because he's been pitching this government as a government of innovation and that the government should be the exemplars of innovation and showing the private sector how to build this next level economy, the new economy. So they were, probably one of the biggest cloud projects the government's engaged in, catastrophic failure.
Well, for me, and I'm going to be a bit sarcastic here, but isn't this a bit of Turnbull's form when it comes to innovation?
Yeah.
You've had the NBN fiasco.
Yeah.
And so it comes to me as no
Well, you got to remember, Turnbull basically invented the internet. So if anyone's going to know how these things work, it'll be Malcolm. The NBN is a fiasco under Turnbull. The census is a fiasco. He's really, I think he would struggle to get another job in technology, aside from the fact he's got $200 million and could just buy a company if he wanted to. But I don't think he's got a lot of credibility left in that sector. I definitely think his own political capital within the party is probably not great where it should be. I would be surprised to see if he sticks around for the full term, to be honest.
This is actually a good point to segue into that discussion. I'd find it hard for him to make out the year as Prime Minister, to be honest.
Yeah. It's a sad thing. I can't imagine who they're going to replace him with.
Because he's got no cheerleaders in the coalition.
They're gone, yeah.
So basically, anything good he does manage to do, no one's going to be cheering about it.
Well, he hasn't done anything, though. And he's been Prime Minister now for about 12 months. And there's no real achievements you can talk about. He's what? Like, the NBN's rolled out a bit, but it's a bit shit. The census is blown up. Some trade deals that Tony signed. No. See, there's just nothing Malcolm can be taking credit for that's positive in the nation.
Worst thing is
haven't got a budget through.
Dogs are worse on his side than coming from Labor.
Yeah.
Labor can just sit back and take it easy. I
mean, don't forget, Malcolm was elected to lead the party, and he was supposed to take them to an election where they would actually conclusively win. When he came in, he had this massive burst of popularity. Everyone was like, we made the right decision. We got rid of Tony.
High fives.
We're going to go to an election. And then they go to an election. It's a disaster. The coalition returned with a 1-seat majority. The Senate is worse than it was before.
Well, let's be honest here. The coalition has to take some blame for Turnbull. They pretty much hobbled him at the knees the whole time.
Yes, I'm sure. But all those people that did not vote for Malcolm to take over are like, see, this is what we said would happen. So,
and the other thing is,
your Corey Bernardis, if you would,
did turn on Tony to bring Malcolm in. Didn't necessarily like Malcolm. They were more worried about their own seats at the time,
and many of them lost their seats or had their margins made razor thin. It'll be an interesting sort of 3 years if he sees it through. I imagine we'll be going back to the polls sooner or later. Yeah, all it takes is one sitting Liberal member to just not show up for the day, to be sick, and then all of a sudden entire votes are in danger. And that's just one person. Like if 2 people are absent, if someone travels.
Well, the other thing is he doesn't have anything on the agenda that's going to be, wow. There's just nothing on his agenda that's going to excite anyone. There's just all these traps waiting to snap upon him.
Yeah. Yeah, there was an interesting because it's been the I'm going to take it local for a minute. So it has been the Liberal Party conference has been held in WA. So obviously during the week, I'm sure people out there will realise that there was a contest for the National Party leadership, and Brendan Grills.
This is just a domestic
State level, yeah. Brendan Grills basically has reclaimed leadership of the party. He said that they were going in the wrong direction. The Liberals were going to lose the election and that something needs to be done urgently. Brendan Grills has come back to take the leadership of the party after a lengthy series of meetings with these 12 MPs. He then followed up by announcing pretty much immediately after that the economic plan for the National Party is to introduce a mining tax, hitting BHP and Rio Tinto for $5 a tonne on their iron ore. And he wants to use BHP and Rio Tinto to put more pressure on the federal government to adjust the GST return for the state. So he wants to have a floor of 75 cents in the dollar established for WA, and that when we hit that level, the mining tax on BHP and Rio Tinto will go away. So he's trying to strong arm these mining companies into doing the hard work for him. Now, this is interesting because at the Liberal conference, obviously they're not happy with Brendan Grills. He's also said that the alliance between the two parties not necessarily guaranteed. He used to say that back in the day as well, trying to get a better deal for the Nationals. But he's come out and said that. So then the state president of the party, Norman Moore, slammed Brendan Grills and his public undermining of Colin Barnett. The deputy premier, Liza Harvey, came out and said the same thing, that the economic plan was chaos and madness and that we shouldn't be fighting. We need to present a unified front. Meanwhile, Colin Barnett actually met with Malcolm Turnbull during the week to talk about GST reform. And one of the interesting things they did talk about was potentially establishing a GST floor so that states would get back a certain amount guaranteed that they could not go below. Now, it may not be the 75 cents in the dollar that Grills wants, but it's interesting that essentially the Nationals' plan is potentially getting proposed to Turnbull. So Turnbull essentially gave commitment to think about this, which Colin Barnett has taken as a guarantee from the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister's department has then come out to suggest that essentially this is a thought bubble. It's something that we're interested in pursuing and that we're going to take it to the next COAG meeting and see how it floats with the other states. So this is once again Malcolm Turnbull engaging in his thought bubbles, which seem to be very unpopular with the voting population. They just don't like hearing Malcolm maybe having an idea or not get shot down by Scott Morrison. This could be what undoes him. If he goes to COAG, floats this idea, it's hideously unpopular. The last thing he took to COAG was making the states popular for raising the GST, and then if not that, making the states responsible for their own income taxes if they wanted, so they can have different levels of taxation and compete against each other. Very unpopular with them as well. Turnbull's credentials on economics don't seem to be there.
No.
He keeps doing these thought bubbles, these little experiments to see if they resonate, and all they do is make him more and more unpopular with his own party.
It's weird. Like he doesn't have the political capital to be dominant with an idea and see it through. So he does this weird thing of floating it to the audience to see how they respond to it. And basically, every time he floats something, he gets a negative reception to it.
It's interesting because I would have thought, and I myself do think, that I like it when politicians talk about the ideas they have and they float them with the population to see how Australia feels about it. However, it does make him look weak and like he's not providing leadership, it's interesting. It's this interesting dichotomy. Like I, on the one hand, I like this. On the other hand, I'm like, Jesus, man, we elected you to the position. I didn't fucking vote for you, but Australia did. And so just do your job.
Well, it's a
right? Provide the leadership.
To try that you're suggesting here, where he goes to the broader audience to see, can we get consensus on some of the tougher issues that divide us? And seemingly at the moment, the answer is no.
Yeah, but
is that a matter of, is it an issue with the man, an issue with the party?
I think it's the man.
Yeah.
Because one of the important parts of leadership is selling people on an idea and then bringing them along on the journey. And Malcolm can't sell people on the idea, and he sure as shit isn't bringing anyone along on a journey because he's like, what about this? What about that? What about this completely polar opposite idea? Like he just keeps floating different things to see if they resonate, and none of them resonate enough with anyone, and he doesn't try and sell people on the idea. He's just like, all right, well, we'll move on to the next thing then. And they're just all unpopular in equal amounts with different segments of society. So it's interesting. I still continue to think that this is another demonstration that the man's not going to last. So yeah.
Well, while we're still on the news of domestic politics, Georgie boy, our Attorney General, George Brandis, was back in federal court on Friday.
Defending his right to a private diary.
He certainly is. As I said, so he's appealing the decision to comply with a Freedom of Information request for his diary entries between September 2013 and May 2014, when certain decisions were being made for funding for a lot of the government agencies, departments under his command.
Doesn't it make it look like he has something to hide?
Well, that's what people are claiming, especially the Shadow Attorney General Mark Dreyfus, who's pursuing this court and defending himself or presenting the case himself. And he's quite a talented Queen's Counsel, so he does have the experience and knowledge to do so. Georgie Boy initially rejected the...
Is George defending himself as well? He's a...
No.
Oh.
He's using government resources too.
Oh, good on him.
I could be... He's definitely using government resources to assist the because he's using there's a government agency or something that helps the government. So they've got the government of the day has access to legal resources. And I think the opposition do as well to legal resources in terms of defending cases or how they should process with the legal aspects of some of the policies they might be putting into place.
Yeah, fair enough.
So he's using access to that. However, Georgie Boy originally rejected the FOI, claiming it would take hundreds of hours to process and required the personal attention of the Attorney General interfering with his daily work request. Now, I didn't think freedom of information was necessarily, measured or weighed of how much it would annoy the person it was being requested for. I didn't think that was one of the measures of whether it should be granted or not.
Well, I also would imagine that the government would have a unified calendar solution in place for all government staff on the off chance that an FOI request was received to have access to that calendar. So an export from whatever system that would be, you would imagine is already in place.
Well, I don't think it's the technical aspect. I think
George wants to redact information is what's happening.
Yeah, he wants, and they want to go and individually pursue every person who he met with to see are they comfortable with that meeting being made public. And I think, well, hold on, anyone who engages with a politician should consider that public
in
information.
Advance. Yeah.
You don't
I agree.
to keep that secret. So it's very obvious that he has something to hide, or he has something that he doesn't think would reflect well on himself, the Attorney General's department, or the government in power at the moment.
Yeah, he's never really shown too much respect for the Attorney General's department, so I imagine it's reflected better on himself. He's a bit of a tyrant,
and
old Brando.
So on the one that says, "Don't worry, even though we're collecting all your internet data," which he doesn't seem to understand.
Yeah,
it's all, do as I say, not as I do. Pretty much.
We want your data. We want your metadata. You can't have my diary. It's an interesting. I wonder if anyone's explained that little irony to him.
Well, they probably have hinted it to him, and he's
probably missed it.
Such an arrogant, such and
went
such.
Over his head.
Care. So, as I said, he originally rejected it. It was appealed to. I have it written in here in the reading I can never write.
Brilliant.
The Administrative Appeals Tribunal, who in December called on the AG to reconsider the request. So basically saying, no, we don't accept your rejection of it. Go back and reconsider it. And Georgie Boy, went to appeal it.
Brandis wouldn't like hearing that.
No.
Sorry, George, your assessment's flawed. We have to go back and think about it again. He's like, we thought about it. I'm fucking right. You're wrong.
So apparently this is quite unusual for someone to go take it to the next step and appeal it to the federal court. Once the administrative
well, speaking as someone who didn't want to see his time wasted, this certainly seems to be a galactic waste of his time taking it through all of the legal processes as well.
It is crazy. I don't quite understand. And, if Barack Obama has to make his diary, his government diaries available, and the New South Wales Prime Minister. So what I'm saying is there's precedent. Well, the American one is an example, but there's precedents in Australia of politicians having to reveal their diaries. And when I say diaries, I don't mean, on Tuesday I had chocolate ice cream and I thought that Tony Abbott was fantastic in Parliament today. No, it's more about who they're meeting with.
Yeah.
That shouldn't be a secret.
It should be public information. You're employed by the public. You're paid by the public purse. You're employed by the public to do a job. The information about what you do in that job should be freely available. And
he's using all the excuses, like it's a waste of taxpayers' money for his staff to go through it. He's claiming security issues, ISIS.
Hey, look, it's an offshore issue maybe. Maybe he should put his diary on Nauru outside of government jurisdiction, on Australian courts' jurisdictions, and then they can't touch it.
So the court heard his appeal. They've reserved their judgment, so it will take bloody months again to hear any sort of decision on that one. But let's hope, fingers crossed, that he will be forced to reveal his diary, as it should be.
Yeah, I would imagine that this is an important lesson for George to understand, is that he's not Darth Vader. He doesn't command the galaxy.
So what else you got for me, Dean?
Well, I have one more story left. It's sort of a two-pronged story. So I'm going to start with the semi-funny part, which is actually laughing at a homophobic man. So Rodrigo Duterte took aim this week at the US diplomats. He was on national television.
So Filipino president?
Yep, Filipino president on TV. And he came out and said, look, as you're all aware, I'm fighting with John Kerry's ambassador. This guy, his gay ambassador, this son of a whore, he's pissed me off. Now, obviously, Duterte feels that the US ambassador, it's Philip Goldberg, I should mention his name.
So I'm a bit unfamiliar with, the nuances of bureaucratic speak and, the interchange between diplomats and governments. But
son of a whore
is that code for something?
Yeah, no, I think it's code for he's a son of a whore. It's not what you'd expect. It's not very presidential of him. No. I mean, the man himself is not a particularly strong diplomat or a presidential. He doesn't have any gravitas around him. He
doesn't believe in political correctness, is what you're saying.
No. I'm not even sure if Philip Goldberg is gay. I don't care if he is. I mean, I guess can he do his job well? Obviously, Duterte is upset because Goldberg, along with our own ambassador, came out during the elections and said that this man who is basically validating rape, when he was talking about the rape of an Australian missionary, in the late 80s, and how he would have rather had first chance at her because he was the mayor at the time.
Very disgusting comments.
Yeah, so Duterte feels that these two guys were basically interfering in local politics. That doesn't sound like you're interfering in local politics. That sounds we're just saying you can't say that shit, dude. That's not cool.
Well, it does raise an. I mean, I don't want to segue too far out of your
segue
story
away
here, but it is an interesting question of obviously. Diplomats are encouraged not to, make comments during elections in foreign countries. But is there a line that is crossed when they should be making comments?
I think, especially the Australian one, it's an Australian citizen you're talking about. So
just in general,
it's in their ballpark.
Oh, sorry, yeah, I see what you're saying.
The American one, arguably, I probably still would have made the same comment. It's probably not good for the stability of the region to have a man like this in power.
No, not at all.
As is shown, he's given people carte blanche to murder people in the street. I don't know.
On that issue, him and his cronies have drawn up kill lists.
Yeah, there's kill lists. I think they've killed about 1,000 people now since he's come to power. Something crazy.
And there's stories about wrongly accused people being summarily executed with no judicial process.
Yeah, extrajudicial killings.
The funny thing is that him and the police who's attacked for being corrupt, yet it's that same instrument which he's given carte blanche to do these extrajudicial killings. It makes no sense.
It's interesting. He was actually, I'm going to go to my second prong of this story. So he has recently ordered the military to destroy the Abu Sayyaf militant group. They've been an enemy of the state for about 25 years, engaging in kidnapping, bombings, beheadings of foreign nationals.
Yeah, they killed beheaded two Canadians.
Recently. So he's given the military orders to take them out. He's basically promised to give them whatever money they need to buy equipment and funding, whatever. And he's also seeking to get another 20,000 soldiers enlisted to make the army stronger and to ensure the territorial integrity of the region. Duterte has described the Abu Sayyaf militant group essentially as being a looming problem that may well turn into be the next ISIS, and he refuses to ignore this problem. So it's interesting to see his extrajudicial killings are extending out now to a wider audience. You can claim your neighbour is a drug dealer, a drug addict, or a member of this militant group. Who knows how many people he's planning on killing. It does seem to be a bit of a cleanse going on.
Do you think he might extend this out to China?
He certainly doesn't like China and South China Sea.
Yeah, so...
America currently backed that claim with The Hague, which I thought was weird, because Duterte's a madman.
It'd be interesting to see how far he pursues the madman strategy against China in those claims.
It will be interesting to see. I can't imagine China wanting... China has never hasn't fought an offensive war in 400 and something years. They're quite, decent, peaceful folk. And I can't imagine the Philippines putting up much of a fight against the army that China has. But you never know. They're definitely, like I said, they're bolstering their armed forces for a reason. 20,000 troops is way more than you need to fight a local militant group.
Well, it could be almost a presidential guard type scenario. He's building up his own force.
Yeah, who knows? Handpicked. Saddam Hussein had one of those. Didn't work out so well for him.
No, eventually. Might have to put up with him for 20 years before it doesn't work out. That's the problem. Well, not us specifically.
Problem for the Philippines.
But he still has massive support there, which is the crazy thing.
Yeah, he's pretty popular. Although people are... I've been reading some articles where More and more people are questioning why their spouses have been murdered,
Yes.
or their sons, their daughters, their friends who were not drug dealers. They had nothing to do with it. There was one where woman's husband was taken away in handcuffs and then got shot by police when he tried to get a weapon off one of them. Now, I don't know about you, but if my hands are cuffed behind my back, I'm going to have a hard time getting a gun out of a holster because I won't be able to see what I'm doing while I'm
You're
reaching
just
for
not
it.
familiar with the craftiness of the criminal element.
And that's true. I'm not. So, yeah, shot in the back of the head as well. So we'll see. I think that people, even if his heart is in the right place, which I don't think it is, people are certainly taking advantage of this. I'll give you a medal if you kill a drug dealer rather than prison time. I'll write you a pardon. I definitely think there's some wrongful killings going on.
Moving back to domestic issues.
Sure.
My new segment. I like coming out with new segments every
You
week.
do,
but,
and then they never recur.
Corey Watch.
Corey Watch. This is a recurring thing.
It is a
Damn
recurring.
it, my joke immediately fell flat.
Corey Bernardi, Senator for South Australia, made claims that through his new organisation, Australian Conservatives, or for our international folk, Australian Tea Party, managed to sign up 50,000 people to the Australian Conservative site. So on their website, they had to sign up to be a part of the movement.
I wonder how many of those are real people.
I could imagine he could have got 50,000 loons.
Yeah, I was attempting to sign up as Mike Hunt.
But he's actually starting to worry the coalition, wondering what is the purpose of the Australian Conservatives? Because Corey's been quite cagey on the subject of what the Australian Conservatives is all about.
Well, he's positioning himself as a power broker now. You know, he's got these 50,000 people behind him that'll do what he says, or at least take his lead on things. It makes Corey more of an influential individual.
So yeah, exciting times for followers of Corey to see what he gets up to. And more excitement in the world of Corey is his blog. Love his blog.
I don't know how you read. I mean, I read it sometimes, but it's
I want the
it's
listeners
challenging
to
stuff.
know what I suffer to provide content for this show.
Fair enough.
Because on the other, it's quite entertaining to try and step into the mind of Corey. Even better is reading the comments of his blog post to see, the pretty much, I agree with you, Corey.
We love you, Corey.
He had comments about the census dust-up.
Oh, did he?
Yes. So he is a coalition senator, so it's interesting that he had something to say on it. I thought he'd want to be quite quiet on the subject of...
Corey's not
the
known for being
census.
quiet.
Apparently, he was initially concerned with the privacy issues that were sort of brought forward by some of his colleagues in the Senate. However, he decided that was all about them attention-seeking, and that since Australians are willingly providing personal information out on social media and other mediums, then it's not a problem for them to be compelled to give that information.
The thing is, Facebook's voluntary. I don't know if anyone's pointed that out to Corey. If you want to put all your personal information out there, you can. If you don't want to, you don't have to. I would have thought that someone like Corey, you could make a pretty easy and swift argument to, because if we're collecting all this information about Australians, where they live, what their names are, what religion they are, what ethnicity they are, then all it really takes is some kind of madman Donald Trump style getting elected, and all of a sudden they're looking through the census data to identify a certain religious minority within Australia. And it may not be the Muslim people that would suffer on it. It could be Christians like Corey himself. People may show up at his door knowing exactly where he lives and how many people should be there and try and, drag him away. It's not right. I mean, the census is not intended for this purpose. And if you keep this information with these linkage keys that you can generate, because it's based on your name, your birth date, and your gender.
It's just not secure.
It's not secure. You can reverse engineer anyone's key pretty easily, and you can find their information if you have access to that data set. And the potential for future abuse is ridiculous. This has not been thought through at all.
And it's not hard to find news articles about private citizens' data being used, not necessarily maliciously, but not authorised. So you'll see quite a few stories in the newspapers about police officers accessing data for non-policing purposes.
Well, I mean, the ABS has come out and said, look, we've only ever had 14 breaches in the past, and none of them involved breaches of the census data. The point is, the census data did not contain useful information in the past. You could not identify individual records, therefore it was just aggregate data. Why would someone want to access that when it's publicly available? But once you make it a honeypot of all kinds of information about people, where I can find out exactly where they live, exactly what they earn, exactly what religion they are, exactly what race they are, exactly like it's people will go after it, as demonstrated by the census site itself when it was attacked with the DDoS.
Well, the interesting thing
The
about
denial of service attack.
privacy information and that linkage is that the ABS has previously gone out with external consultants to investigate, the efficacy of doing that, and resoundingly it came back no. The Australian public won't wear it.
Yeah.
There's issues. So the next time around, you decided to do an internal investigation into whether they should do it, and they got the tick of approval.
Well, there you go.
But,
Just keep asking different people until someone says yes.
But going back to Corey, he obviously he was sort of lamenting with his readership about what a disaster the census was. But do you think he had any blame for the coalition government?
I'm going to guess no.
No, it was the ABS.
No one could foresee this happening.
No, how could the ABS have the hubris not to expect such calamities with IT systems, considering when there's such a precedence for many a system going down?
Yeah, it's ridiculous to expect a system that gets used once a year by 20-something million people on a single night to be stable without significant testing up front. And they undertook none of that. And they rated the server. The ABS was expecting 500,000 requests an hour. It's not going to be uniformly spread for a start, right? Most people are going to go onto that census website after dinner when the news is finished or home and away or whatever it is. There's going to be these massive spikes. When a TV show finishes, bang, spike. And if you look at the dates and time associated with each of the attacks that were received by the census, they correspond with, there's one in the morning, there's one at lunchtime, there's one at about 5 o'clock in the evening Eastern Standard Time, there's one at 7:30. They're possibly not even attacks. These seem like the likely times that people would be like, well, I'm on my lunch break, I'll do the census. Oh, it's just, I've knocked off work, I'll do the census. Oh, it's 7:30 at night, I'll do the census. Like, these people didn't even anticipate this. It bothers me so much that they have either no competent IT staff there or just, and these people are mathematicians, they should be able to do estimations on population distributions when he's, like, it just, like, what idiot was in charge of this project?
Well, I've supported websites before that have thought they've had a denial of service attack, but they just haven't had their firewalls configured correctly. Then the firewall thought it was getting a DNS attack.
Yeah.
So a denial of service attack.
Well, this was proven to happen. Yeah, the firewall thought there was an intrusion and there wasn't. They just had their shit configured wrong.
Yeah.
So this is a clusterfuck of monumental proportions.
Definitely.
Heads are going to roll. Turnbull says. Probably Bill Shorten's.
I think that's all I've got from my...
That is everything I've got for this week as well.
The only last thing... This show's going for quite a bit.
It's see, you take away Jason and we go longer.
Dickhead Dutton.
Oh, Pete. What's he been up to?
Well, this week, saw the leaking by the Guardian Australian newspaper of more than 2,000 incident reports of abuse and self-harm.
Oh, yeah, in the Nauru files.
Seekers and refugees in Australian immigration detention centres on Nauru. So obviously, either on Dutton's own reconnaissance or he was put forward by Turnbull to go out there and defend the cause of the policy. And he had some not so pleasant comments or really stupid comments. I'll put them forward to you and we can comment on them.
Yeah, sure.
First of all, he said, I have been made aware of some incidents of sexual assault because in the end, people have paid money to smugglers and they want to come to our country. Some people have even gone to the extent of self-harming and people have had self-immolated in an effort to get to Australia and certainly have made false allegations in an attempt to get to Australia. So basically, he's gone down his classic victim-blaming route.
I mean, 2 people have self-immolated, and he's suggesting that he did that just going to Australia. No, Pete, they did that because the hellish conditions you've got them in made them feel there was no other way out than to try and kill themselves. And he's also suggesting that this was done intentionally as if to target him, or that these sexual assault claims are all false, just like these. Like, it really bugged the shit out of me. I remember reading this article during the week. I hate this man. I hate this man. He's evil.
I just don't understand why he doesn't have a professional PR person on his staff that would sort of go, all right, we're not going to go down the victim-blaming path, Peter. It doesn't really resound too well with Australia. Yeah. I know you in your little pea brain that you think if you mention your main attacking points that people will go, yeah, Peter's right. But no, if you mention people smugglers, that doesn't sort of just put a smokescreen across the rest of your statement. People actually hear the rest of the statement.
Yeah.
They're hearing the victim blaming. They're not...
Interestingly enough, I read another article during the week that suggests that there's a movement within the Senate to try and have the abusive detainees in Nauru included in the scope of the Royal Commission into the abuse of detainees in the Northern
Yes.
Territory to make it a more wider-reaching Royal Commission, which I think is a really, really interesting and compelling move. I don't know if it'll be successful, but I would like to see that looked at and seriously looked at. However, with the coalition in power, I can't necessarily see that happening.
I can't imagine Peter Dutton launching such an investigation. I don't even think Peter Dutton has any concept of empathy.
I don't think Parliament. I don't think Parliament's sitting anytime soon either. Are they? September they're back. I think it is.
Labor are planning to launch that in the next session.
Yeah. So, but that's still a way off. So right now, Pete has sort of some clear air where he can say what he wants, and there's very little repercussion for anyone to be able to stop him from doing these things, other than to point out the idiocy of what he's saying. But he doesn't seem to care about that. He hasn't in the past.
Well, and the Australian media doesn't really seem to pursue this too far anyway. So he gets away with, lazy debate.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is that this would be, from a coalition point of view, this would be so easy to deal with. It would be, you come out there and go, it concerns me that these allegations are being made, and the government the Australian government does not condone any sort of maltreatment of people under our care, and we will look into these matters with seriousness.
I believe he's referred the investigation to Nauru. I believe it's like this. It's not our jurisdiction. They need to contact the authorities in Nauru to have an investigation done.
Yeah, to who the leakers were.
Yeah, which is ridiculous. Which is ridiculous. This, I mean, it is rough seeing this this pushing of problems out into jurisdictions where we don't necessarily have authority, therefore we can't be held responsible. But I kind of hope that the people of Nauru eventually grow tired of all this bullshit happening on their island and kick us off.
Unfortunately, I can't see that.
The money,
anytime soon. This is a big money earner for them. I think it's the major revenue source for them at the moment.
Yeah, human misery. It's always worked out well for people in the past being in that business.
Well, that was a really unpleasant note to end.
A bit of a downer.
Make a rule that the BAP does not end on Peter Dutton issues or anything he's involved with, unless it's something funny to do with Border Force.
Or potatoes.
All right, Australia, thank you very much for listening. I've been Franco.
I've been Dean.
And the cuck sends his apologies.
Get well soon, Jace.